Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Allheart Podcast. This is the return of the spring series. This is going to be episode 2 of the spring series. Unfortunately, last week's episode with Jacob Hallenstein had to be canceled. It's going to be rescheduled, likely to some point this week. But I'm overjoyed to have with me today Justin LaCertosa, who is my co-host on Off the Top Rope for the Wrightway Sports Network. Justin, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to finally come on this show and talk about a little more about wrestling. And usually when we have the Off the Top Rope for the Wrightway Sports Network, it's basically about just daily things going on in the world of wrestling. But in this episode, we'll dive into really our favorite matches and wrestlers and how we got into it, which we never really get to talk about on that show. So I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get the opportunity to finally just get a retrospective and just like pick your brain, honestly, and just get to see what your favorite stuff is of all time. I've spoken a little bit about it on the show, but I haven't really gotten your all-time favorite stuff. But I think before that, just before I start the show, follow us at Allheart Pod on Twitter. On Instagram, we're at Allheart Network. We're going to have a new show each week. It's going to be at 8 p.m. Central Time, 9 p.m. Eastern. Next week, we're going to have Matt Blaustein on the show. He's a former Wisconsin Badgers fullback. He's going to talk about his life as a student athlete and beyond. But let's get into the show right now. So let's just talk about like origins for you. When did you start getting into professional wrestling? Like when did you start getting interested? When did you start watching?
I want to say around, I believe it was 2011. It was 2011 thinking back on it now, because it took me a minute to remember because it's been a while. I've been a fan basically my whole life, but it was 2011 because it was like right when the Rock and John Cena feud was going into full effect before WrestleMania. So it was 2011, and really, I heard a lot of people talking about it through the internet and at school. And that was when I was really young. It was 11 years ago. I'm 17 years old right now. And I was like 6 years old at the time. So, I mean, I was just hearing a lot about it. So I'm like, why not tune in? So I tuned into an episode, I believe it was SmackDown. I think that was the first episode I've watched. And ever since then, I've just been watching on a daily basis. And there was a point where I did take a break from, I believe it was middle of 2017 to the end of 2019. And then I sort of got back into it during quarantine. But I mean, like, at the same time, I've been a fan for around 11 years. I've been caught up for the whole time. And really, as soon as I tuned in for the first time, I don't know what it was when I first watched it, but since like I'm not sure what it was. It's just that I really was drawn into it right away.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to now like realize that you got into it in 2011 because I actually got into it in 2013, and I am probably like 3 years older than you right now, so I'm 20. So I got into it a little bit later than you did, and I am a little bit older than you there. I actually got into it in January 2013 because I vaguely remember it being like a week or two after the 2013 Royal Rumble. I'd seen a few matches here and there in the past, but I never really got interested in it. But I think they had tribute to the troops on one of the main networks before WrestleMania, and I think it was in mid-January or end of January, beginning of February, and I kind of just got interested, just sat down because I had nothing else to do, and got hooked just on one match. I think it was a tag team match between Randy Orton, Ryback, and John Cena against the Shield. So I got completely hooked from there. And ever since then, I was just watching pretty regularly. I did take a break. I want to say it was around WrestleMania 30. I just got kind of bored with it. Because if you remember back then too, that was kind of when they were doing the "will they, won't they" bullshit with Daniel Bryan, and no one really got invested. And I actually stopped watching full time around. I want to say it was probably Royal Rumble 2014. A little after a year after I started watching wrestling, and I was like, "This isn't great stuff." But I ended up coming back around the Royal Rumble 2016. I've been watching Strong since then. I've kind of tuned out of WWE mainly, and I mainly focus on AEW, but WWE I'll tune in for the main stuff. But no, it's interesting to hear that like you and I both took kind of breaks different times, but completely understandable. Like, do you think there's a little bit of a level of burnout that's associated with watching wrestling?
Yes, 100%. And I mean, I'm at the point now where I'm still watching, I mean, mostly on a weekly basis. There's sometimes where I can't, but I'm still watching mostly all WWE and AEW on a weekly basis. But it's different than every other sport, obviously, in the sense that it's professional wrestling and not fully a sport. But at the same time, like the main reason I think it's different is because it's year round. It's way easier for the product to get stale. And these companies have to do things and they have to change a lot of things on a consistent basis for it to not get stale over a year-round period. That's why I took my break in around middle of 2017 till about quarantine, because we had that 2016 year that was great for most of the year with the brand split coming back and really just everyone getting new opportunities and new storylines and new matches. And then after that, kind of just got stale with some bad storylines like the Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton feud I didn't like. Then Jinder Mahal won the WWE title. A lot of things went wrong there. And really, WWE, I could tell they try to change a lot. I mean, not a lot, but like they try to adapt. But sometimes it just doesn't work out. Again, like Jinder Mahal winning the WWE title, that just was no brainer. That should not have happened. And even right now, they're trying to unify these titles for the first time. I think it's been like 8 years since they've done that. But even then, like they're adapting in the wrong way. But I think like there definitely is a burnout period, because even like sometimes if WWE's at its peak, then there's still some points where I just get burnt out as a whole from watching it.
Yeah, 100%. I think that level of burnout is something that is a common sentiment on a bunch of the boards, whether it be Reddit or beyond. It has been a common issue for a lot of people, honestly. It's just been the level of burnout that you sometimes get with watching these programs. It is something that happens. It is something that unfortunately does also claim like a lot of interest in new viewers. There's just such a kind of a stigma around the show, which is kind of boring sometimes. But let's just get right into it. Let's just talk favorite match of all time. Because I know you were writing down a few. You don't have to say one. You could say like a few of them, but I'm interested just in your favorite matches.
I have most of mine are relatively recent matches, like within the last decade, because that's again when I got into wrestling. And I've watched some matches from the past, but these are the ones that stick with me. The most recent matches stick with me the most because I saw them live and it's a different connection. In that point, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know the outcome. So I think one of my favorite matches that really got me into wrestling as a whole, granted, this was around a year and a half, 2 years after I got into it, but this one really drew me in a lot more, is CM Punk versus The Undertaker. Not even just the match, the feud just really drew me in. And there's another CM Punk match on here that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, but CM Punk versus The Undertaker was the match that cemented CM Punk as, spoiler alert, because we're going to talk about it later, but it's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Just that feud as a whole. And really, that feud made it look like CM Punk could be the one to take down The Undertaker, because at that point, he'd already been built up. He was the champion for 400 plus days at that point, only lost it to The Rock. And it seemed like he was a strong enough opponent to go at The Undertaker, especially with the feud that they were building. And even with The Undertaker off screen on TV, off TV, CM Punk was able to really carry this feud a lot when he wasn't on weekly television. And there were even some points in the match where it looked like CM Punk was going to break the streak, which is something that in all those streak matches you needed. You needed a legitimate like turning point where the fans and audience could say, "Oh, the streak might be broken here." And really watching that match over and over again, there's times where I'm like, "Wow, like I can't believe it didn't end here." Like, so that one was definitely one of my favorite matches of all time. Another one, and it's the other CM Punk match that I was talking about just a year before, was Chris Jericho versus CM Punk. And this is another one where, again, it's more about the storyline. I really love the storyline for this, looking back on it. And I think a lot of the CM Punk storylines that they did just really were historically great, in the sense that it was like Chris Jericho trying to get him coming out as an alcoholic when he really wasn't. And it just all around, I like that storyline a lot. I think Jericho was the perfect person to put him against. I don't know why it didn't main event. I know it was for money reasons, but definitely should have main evented. But Chris Jericho versus CM Punk is one of my favorites as well. And then I have a couple more that I'll touch on briefly. I have two triple threat matches on here. One was very, very recent, which was Roman Reigns, Edge, and Daniel Bryan. That was one of my favorite WrestleMania main events, really, of all time and in recent memory. And a lot of people were skeptical of Daniel Bryan being in that match, being added to it and ruining the dream match, but I never was, and it really turned out to be a massive success for WWE. And another triple threat match, which is probably my favorite triple threat match during my time as a WWE fan, is Brock Lesnar, John Cena, and Seth Rollins. I believe it was Royal Rumble 2014.
It was 2015. It was the Roman Reigns Royal Rumble.
Yeah, 2015. Yeah. That was one of my favorite ones as well. And it was just, there's so many great spots in that match. And that's one that I haven't rewatched in a while, so I can't really give full analysis on it. But it's one that had so many good spots and so many turning points as well, where, I mean, obviously we all knew at that point Brock Lesnar was going to retain, but there were even some points in that match where we're like, what's going to happen with Seth Rollins and John Cena? So that's one I really liked a lot. And The last two that I'll touch on really quickly are one, the Wyatt family versus the Shield. It was Elimination Chamber 2014, I believe it was, or 2015. I could be wrong. No, it was 2014 definitely because the Shield hadn't broken up. Or was it 2013? Do you remember?
No, I think it was 2014. Because 2015, that would have been the year. Oh boy, 2015 Elimination Chamber was a rough pay-per-view.
Yeah,
I think it was 2014.
yeah, it was. I keep getting my years mixed up with this, so I'll say 2014. Yeah. But this was one where these were two prominent factions in WWE with over 3 members. Oh, the Wyatt family had 3 members, and the Shield had 3 members. So they were both two dominant factions in WWE, and that's not something we see very often. And this was a match that, while I was a fan at the time, I was like, I really want these two groups to face off so much, and it was highly anticipated for me, especially. And then it finally happened, and it really just delivered. It was one of the, in my opinion, the best 6-man tag match that I've seen in modern history. And I can't really put my finger on what the storyline was, but just the match as a whole was really nice to me. And finally, I'm going to throw in an AEW match here. Hangman Adam Page versus Kenny Omega. Again, this is another one that was storyline driven because that was one of the best storylines I've ever seen as a wrestling fan. And the match fully delivered with all the emotions and storylines in that match that were really planted in there. And the wrestling as a whole was great. Obviously, when you put 2 of those talents in the ring, you're going to have a great match. But the storyline throughout and really the slow burn and slow build of a year plus for the storyline made it even better for me. So if I were to just like list off a bunch of matches that I really enjoyed, those are those are my favorite ones.
Yeah, for me, I mean, most of my favorite matches, I would say if I had been more invested in the CM Punk Undertaker storyline because I had just gotten to wrestling and had a better idea of the characters, it probably would be up here. Purely from a wrestling sense, it probably is one of the best matches I've ever seen. It was a great match, but from the storyline, I was too young and like I was too new to the story. Just I didn't really fully understand it. For me, most of my favorite matches kind of dwell on NXT. I think I've been open in the past saying that NXT, the original NXT, your Black and Gold era, is my favorite professional wrestling show in general or promotion. I guess I'll get started with probably what is my favorite match of all time. That's the Revival versus DIY 2 out of 3 falls match at NXT TakeOver Toronto. The match is a masterclass. It's probably the best tag team work I've ever seen. This was probably like 2016. This is 2017. So like 2017, the fact that they haven't really I haven't even seen a tag team match since then that's really like thrilled me like that one did. That match was a masterclass of technical wrestling, of just in-ring psychology, emotion. The finish was probably my favorite finish of all time, just with Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa trapping both of the Revival guys in their submission holds and just making them have to tap out together. It just completely worked at the story, which is basically the Revival kept cheap-shotting them because they'd be preoccupied with one of the Revival members and the other one would come in, attack the other one. Their match before that too, which is long forgotten, at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn, was also a really good match, very strong overall. But I think other matches, Pete Dunne versus Tyler Bate at NXT TakeOver Chicago, also an absolutely spectacular match. And this might have been the TakeOver right after. So TakeOver had a huge run of success for a while. It was a really solid match. I was just thrilled the entire time. I think a lot of the counters that were going on, Pete Dunne getting the championship, and then Pete Dunne's title run was one of the best runs I've seen in a very long time. He held the belt for, I think, over 700 days. So he was a really good champion. But just like Tyler Bate, who I don't know where he is right now, but they are completely misusing him. But he was spectacular. And then other stuff from NXT, I gotta say the fatal, it was either the 6 or 5-man ladder match they had at NXT TakeOver New Orleans for the North American Championship, where Adam Cole won it, but Ricochet also debuted in that match. There's really nothing left to be said for that match. That match was just insane all around. It's also really interesting just looking at everyone who was in the match, and that everyone in that is either gone from WWE or not really being treated well. I know Ricochet just got the Intercontinental title, but 5 of 6 guys are out of WWE, and Ricochet's there, and he was kind of in the lower card until he won the Intercontinental title recently. But then we're going about like main roster fights. I do have to say, Um, Seth Rollins has had a few of my favorite matches in general. I think one that's really, really underrated constantly is that big Intercontinental Championship fight between him, Finn Balor, and The Miz from WrestleMania 34, the show opener. That was a really good match, and I don't think The Miz gets nearly enough credit for his in-ring work. He's not going to be the best guy in the company. He's never supposed to have been the best guy in the company. But if you remember, that was the match that launched the Monday Night Rollins era, where Rollins was consistently putting on the best matches on the show, and he was effectively carrying the Raw brand. Other matches I really liked. I really liked Ember Moon and Asuka. Their original match, NXT Takeover Orlando, which is unfortunately the match where Asuka got hurt in. She had to relinquish her title belt, but keep that undefeated streak, and then Ember Moon won it, won the relinquished belt, the vacant title. But that match as a whole was spectacular. But I think those were probably my favorite matches. If I had to choose one from AEW, it'd honestly be pretty tough at this point. There's been so much good wrestling from AEW. I do have to give that soft spot to Adam Page versus Lance Archer on that AEW Dynamite, where he got busted open and the buckshot lariat over the top rope. That was spectacular. So I would say that probably for my favorite AEW match, but those are probably my favorite matches of all time. I guess going from there, I would do favorite wrestler of all time, but I feel like honestly it's more fun to kind of just go into favorite feud of all time. So what's your favorite feud of all time?
This is one that I have a ton of favorite feuds, and obviously one of them, I mean, I touched on it a little bit before, CM Punk versus The Undertaker. That was one of my favorite feuds of all time. I just really like the way that they had CM Punk get into The Undertaker's head in a way with that feud, and obviously it tied in with Paul Bearer, which, I mean, I think that maybe would have been a little bit too far, but at the same time, like, it was still a great way to do it in a storyline perspective, to get CM Punk as much heat on him as possible going against The Undertaker, trying to beat the streak. So, yeah, I mean, I touched on it mostly before, so I won't touch on it too much right now. That one was one of my favorite feuds of all time. And then another one was Seth Rollins versus Dean Ambrose. This is probably my most recent favorite feud of all time. And obviously, Dean Ambrose is now known as Jon Moxley. But at the time, Seth Rollins versus Dean Ambrose, I don't really like how they did the Shield breakup in terms of handling Roman Reigns, but the way they handled these two right after the breakup was perfect, because they sort of launched Roman Reigns right into the main card, and it didn't really seem like he had any bad blood against Seth Rollins for what he did. But Dean Ambrose was the one that went after him, and they had a really, really long, drawn-out feud. And it really, like, when Ambrose, the rest of the time in WWE, I mean, even after that feud, like, even at times where they were both faces, I mean, they still had history together, and it was pretty clear. And obviously, that heel turn, the heel turn was great. I wouldn't change anything about that. But the way Ambrose was as a heel, that wasn't really great. But like, it was sort of a thing where, like, they had that feud, and they're known as really just rivals forever at that point on. So that's something I really liked, and the match is delivered on every scale too. Another one is Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn, and this one goes all the way back to NXT. I think their NXT feud was definitely their best feud in WWE. I think that was definitely the best one, with Kevin Owens turning on Sami Zayn. I believe it was right after he won the NXT Championship, correct?
Yeah, it was literally a minute after, pretty much.
Yeah, that was the perfect way to do it. I believe that was Owens' debut, correct?
Oh yeah, he debuted earlier in the show as a babyface, and the crowd went wild.
Yeah, so that was basically like his debut, and he turned heel on the first night. So, I mean, I really like their NXT feud more than their main roster feuds, but their main roster feuds also put it as one of my favorite feuds of all time as well, because they've had tons of matches on the main roster, tons of different feuds. I really like the one they did last year. That's the one that's really fresh in my mind, so I'll talk about it. I like the way they did it with Logan Paul. I don't really like Logan Paul being on WWE TV too often, but I think this was the best way they used him. And in terms of putting him in that feud, I did like that. Even though I don't like him on WWE TV, I did like the way they integrated him into this feud. And as for some others, another one is definitely the Daniel Bryan versus the Authority feud. And that's one of the feuds that got me full on into wrestling. The two things that really got me fully into wrestling are CM Punk versus The Undertaker. that storyline and the Daniel Bryan versus the Authority storyline. And obviously, Daniel Bryan wasn't even supposed to be in that situation. If CM Punk doesn't quit, that doesn't happen. But I mean, that's one of the rare instances of WWE listening to the fans and putting Daniel Bryan in that spotlight. And the way they did it was just absolutely perfect too. Having him be that underdog for that entire stretch, that was just perfect. And that was one of the ways I got into WWE, and really became just a diehard wrestling fan. And as for one other, oh, definitely John Cena and CM Punk. This is one that I wasn't a fan at the time of this feud, the 2011 one. I wasn't a fan at the time, but I've rewatched every single promo, obviously the pipe bomb, but every single promo of this feud, and it was just incredible. And every single match of this feud was incredible. They did ruin the Summer Punk after that, but it was just incredible. And I did also really enjoy their feud, and I believe it was 2013. I think that was a really solid follow-up to it. So they had two really solid feuds together, and that I think that one, it's not my favorite feud of all time, but I think that definitely lands top three with Punk and Undertaker and Daniel Bryan versus the Authority, and then Punk and Cena. But those, if I were to just list off all those my top feuds of all time. Oh, and one more that I completely forgot about: the New Day versus the Usos. That's probably my favorite main roster tag team feud of all time. And they really, I keep forgetting the years, but I keep losing track of the time span. But what year was that? 2018, 2017, 2018?
I mean, they've feuded so many times at this point that you can't really even like do a single one.
Yeah.
If you're talking about the don't get all rated R like your boy Xavier Woods, that was 2017.
Yeah, I believe it was that one. And that wasn't even a time where I was fully into wrestling. And that's when I sort of took my break. But really, all the matches they put on, I watched after it. And the feud as a whole, it was just, I think that's a Hall of Fame worthy feud. So if I were to list off all my favorite feuds, those would be the ones.
Yeah, I think honestly, I'll start it off with New Day and the Usos. I do think that is the GOAT main roster feud. I think a lot of people are kind of hesitant these days to kind of say like this or that is the greatest of all time, because obviously you have like past stuff from the Ruthless Aggression era, Attitude Era. But truthfully, no two teams have really had the longevity and like the good match potential, but also the promos and the character work with each other that the Usos and the New Day have. I think by the time push comes to shove and they're both getting inducted in the Hall of Fame, I think each other should be inducting each other. Unless Rikishi wants to induct the Usos, but I really do think it makes more sense for the New Day to induct them. Their careers are so intertwined at this point that it would make no sense to go with anyone else. But I think like you can't even count on one hand how many good matches they've had together. Even if it was just guys like Big E versus Jey Uso on a regular random SmackDown. The chemistry all these guys have with each other is spectacular. I mean, it makes sense that backstage they're all like best friends, so they definitely enjoy working with each other. I think that's another reason why people like enjoy this feud so much. But then if we're talking about all-time feuds for me, I think the one for me that had probably it had a terrible payoff, and I'm still like remiss to this day, and I'm still upset that like it had this payoff. But Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho had probably,
I forgot that one too.
yeah.
That was my favorite. That's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah. Kevin Owens, Chris Jericho probably had my favorite modern wrestling feud in general. Just the way that it started, the way that literally everyone warned Chris Jericho and was like, Kevin can't have friends. Like Kevin turns on every friend he has. But then we thought we were getting a new light from Kevin Owens. We thought that Chris Jericho was going to turn on Kevin Owens. This storyline lasted well over 10 months, and it was probably the best example of modern long-term booking that WWE has done in a very long time. But then the Festival of Friendship, probably my favorite like segment in general in any context of professional wrestling. Just the way they did it, the whole "Why is my name not on this?" Or "Why is my name on this list?" And holding it up against the list of KO. That was one of the most heartbreaking moments in wrestling for me. But that moment is just spectacular. I think if we're talking about other like one-on-one feuds that I loved, I absolutely adore Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa. I think that is the GOAT singles feud in NXT. That single-handedly pretty much carried NXT for 2 years. The main event scene was kind of circled around two guys, and most people would kind of get sick of them after a while, but it seemed like every single time they met, even when Ciampa was out with a neck injury or with a knee injury, it still stayed consistent. It was just very, very good wrestling consistently, very good promos, very good character work. Really solidified both guys as just main event face like material, main event heel material. But then like other feuds that I really enjoyed. I think at this point, anyone against Adam Cole is just a great feud because Adam Cole can go in the ring, Adam Cole can get on the mic, can be great. Whole feud that I really liked. I'd have to go with him against Johnny Gargano was pretty good. I think as we look a little bit further back to Adam Cole when he came into NXT did some stuff with Ricochet. That was a good feud, but I think his best feud in NXT was Aleister Black, and I think that was the match where they had the Extreme Rules match. It was insane. Adam Cole was hit with a Death Valley driver onto a chair right on his back. Then next night he made an appearance with Royal Rumble, which was absolutely insane. But I think that was probably his best feud in WWE. But then if we're talking about just like more main event stuff, John Cena and The Fiend, I think that was a spectacular feud. I think the Firefly Funhouse match is actually a blessing that for this one thing that the pandemic was caused it to be held in the Thunderdome or the Performance Center because match was absolutely spectacular. Looking at just a few other matches there. I think Seth Rollins also does a really good amount of character work. I think Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns is actually pretty damn good. I think that was their opportunity to switch to it. I think they should have still, but Rollins' character work right now is probably the best in his career. But I'd say those are probably my favorite feuds. If we're going with the women's feuds, real quick, it's hard for me to say because there's been a lot of good women's wrestling. And recently, like it's hard to single one out. I think Asuka's entire time as NXT Women's Champion was just brilliant. I think her feud against Ember Moon is probably my favorite women's feud of all time. But then you also have stuff with Bianca Belair and Sasha Banks, and that was a great feud as well. And Becky and Bianca right now. So I think honestly, those three are just doing really good work together. But yeah, so that does it for favorite feud. So let's just get into favorite wrestler. Who's your favorite wrestler of all time?
I'm going to give a couple guys, but I'll focus mostly on my favorite wrestler, and it's Daniel Bryan / Bryan Danielson. It's a mix of both, the WWE version and the AEW version. And that's because seeing Daniel Bryan's entire career play out, not including Ring of Honor, because I wasn't really around for that, but from when he first entered WWE in 2010 to now in AEW, it's really just it's pretty obvious to me that he's one of the best to ever do it because his adaptability to play so many different roles and so many different characters as a heel or face, it's unprecedented. And not many guys could really do that in the in today's modern era, let alone in the history of professional wrestling. Not many guys can adapt like that. And really you have the underdog Daniel Bryan, you have the heel Daniel Bryan when he came back from injury. And then you have this new Daniel Bryan in All Elite Wrestling where he's sort of bordering on heel and face. And it's really like when he went to AEW, he still was kind of perceived as that underdog character because that was kind of what he was towards the end of his WWE run as well. But AEW made him into a guy that says, hey, I know I'm one of the best to ever do it, so I'm going to prove it on every single night. That's what he is in AEW, and I really like that. You could really just flip-flop him anywhere. Like the fact that you could have him be that guy that is like, oh, I know I'm the best in the world, to the underdog. Like not many guys are able to pull that off and make it believable. And also, if you could make him not many guys can also be a believable and incredible heel while being able to be the underdog and an incredible face. So Daniel Bryan, and also one more reason why he is here is because the Yes Movement run really got me into Daniel Bryan's character as a whole. That's definitely my favorite Daniel Bryan. But I already talked about the Yes Movement in that feud. But I mean, Daniel Bryan's just adaptability. It's just really drawn me in for his entire career. There's times where, like a couple years back, I would say maybe Seth Rollins or Kevin Owens was my favorite wrestler at the time. But throughout, no one stuck with me as much as Daniel Bryan / Bryan Danielson has. And he's consistently stayed as a staple of my top 3 to 5 wrestlers at every time. So I would say he's my favorite wrestler of all time. But if we're talking about some more guys, I'll bring up one guy from the past. And this is really like, I know I've been sticking of just modern stuff and like matches that I've seen live, but there's one guy that is out of my time that I really have enjoyed my entire life as a WWE fan, and that's Ric Flair. And Ric Flair's work as a heel and work in the ring, it really influenced me to go back and watch some past matches, not just the modern matches. It really influenced me to go back deep in time, and not really deep in time, but you know what I mean in terms of WWE, deep into their roots, and it really just got me invested in every single era of wrestling. And it was mainly because of Ric Flair, because of his work on the mic, his ability to play as a heel, and his work in the ring as well. So Ric Flair is definitely my favorite non-current wrestler, and I also did meet Ric Flair. That was one of the wrestlers that I met. So that was something else that really drew me into him as well. But some other guys I've talked about him a lot, so I'll just touch briefly on him. CM Punk is another guy that really got me into wrestling as well. It's another guy that just can do so much in the ring, and really his peak was his WWE title run that one year, and when his face run as the champion was amazing, and then they shockingly just turned him heel out of nowhere, and his heel run was even better than his face run with the title. So that was that. If I were to give my favorite title run of all time, that would be it. That CM Punk title run, that would be my favorite title run of all time. And then Seth Rollins is probably with Daniel. I'm not going to count CM Punk because he was gone for a while, but with Daniel Bryan, Seth Rollins is my favorite modern wrestler of all time, simply due to the fact that as soon as he turned on the Shield and really came into that like snarky heel that cheats to win, relies on other people to win matches and championships, the Architect character was just so great to me. And then his Intercontinental title run was also peak Seth Rollins as well. And then he had that Universal title run, which I actually think was underrated at first. It didn't go great towards the end, especially with the Fiend thing. But I thought it was underrated at first, and he was giving us some solid matches. And then, again, now I think he's at the peak of his career right now, even better than his 2014, 2015 self. And then one more guy I want to touch on is not Pac. It's Neville. I want to talk about Neville because Neville's another guy that really just transformed my view of wrestling in the same way Ric Flair did, in the sense that, as I said before, Ric Flair really got me into all eras of wrestling. But Neville, the NXT Neville, really just, like, I was more into – I didn't really know when I was first started watching wrestling what my – like, I didn't really understand anything about, like, in-ring psychology and in-ring storytelling and just – like styles of wrestling. I just watched it. But Neville really, like watching his NXT matches, being invested in that era of NXT when Neville was the champion, he really just showed me what different styles of wrestling could be. And obviously his style was very unique compared to the others, but he really showed me that there's different styles of wrestling. And Neville really also brought me into NXT a lot. Him and Sami Zayn were the two guys that got me into NXT full time watching it. And Neville's matches on that brand were just terrific. And he really, again, just showed me that there's a whole other side to wrestling other than just watching it. There's different styles. There's different types of wrestlers. And it really just – Neville's the one guy that really expanded my knowledge on professional wrestling as a whole. So those are – I think I named 5 guys. Those are the 5 my 5 favorite wrestlers of all time, I would say.
Yeah, I got a list pretty similar to that. Because you and I actually have the same favorite wrestler of all time. Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson is probably my favorite wrestler of all time. It's something that I didn't really realize until recently, just how many great angles he's been in. Some of my favorite feuds. One of my favorite feuds I didn't even mention was Daniel Bryan, Kofi Kingston. But Daniel's been in so many, or Bryan, he's been in so many great feuds. And the fact that he literally left WWE after having almost a feud of the year candidate with Roman Reigns, and then goes straight into AEW and has a feud of the year candidate with Hangman Page, and now he's in this tag team with Jon Moxley. He's been incredible. He has not faltered once in the past year, and the fact that he is what some people would put past his prime, he's really not past his prime. He's been hitting on all cylinders. He's been Wrestling Observer newsletter rated him the #1 wrestler of the last year. For a guy of his age, that's insane. For a guy who's like at his point in his career, but he is probably. Even with the 4-year hiatus or 3-year hiatus he had because of the head issues and the neck issues, he still has been ridiculously consistent. I think Daniel Bryan probably is my favorite wrestler of all time. But very closely behind him is someone not a lot of people have, and that's Zack Ryder. I really think Zack Ryder probably was the most innovative wrestler of all time in general, and just not in the sense of in ring. I mean, outside, he was the first wrestler to really utilize social media. He completely predicted cool and that it was going to be the way to market yourself. And Zack Ryder was really that first guy to utilize social media to maximize his potential, to maximize his fan base, get the fans talking about him. It got to the point where fans were chanting his name over The Rock's when The Rock was in the ring cutting a promo. Ryder right now is doing some of the best work of his career right now is Matt Cardona on the indie scene. And I've seen a few of his matches under his new gimmick, the Deathmatch King, and just the ECW original. He's doing incredible work right now. I'm really excited to see what he brings to the table. I do think before I thought he was going to be a terrible person to bring into AEW because I thought it's just going to flood the mid card more. But now he's actually one of the top names I want them to bring in because I don't think they really have someone like him in that mid card spot that absolutely can like just piss off the crowd because he gets go away heat. He doesn't just get regular heel heat. He gets go away heat. He's one of the best heels I've seen in general. And part of me wants to see him and MJF just do a full heel feud because they're both also from Long Island. They're from towns right next to each other, Plainview and Syosset. So, or Plainview and Merrick. So, I'd say Ryder's probably my second favorite, but then right over there is AJ Styles, and I think Styles, his in-ring work speaks for himself. But also, his promo game has really just stepped in his zone since he came to WWE. He's been in a few feuds that I've really liked. AJ Styles, John Cena, specifically being one of them. He was spectacular in that. Also, AJ Styles versus Shane McMahon was very good, very underrated, and now AJ Styles Edge seems to be a very good match, and I'm very excited to see where that goes. And then for a few other guys, Johnny Gargano. Ring work. His promo work is pretty good. I don't think it's the best in the world, but like he's got really good promo ability. I think he's going to be the top free agent once he does decide to come back to wrestling because his wife just gave birth, so he's a new dad. Adam Cole's case, except his promo game is insane. I like Gargano's in ring slightly more than Adam Cole, but Adam Cole is a really good person in ring. Really good promo and has really interesting feuds. Seth Rollins, kind of the same thing as AJ Styles. He's your do-it-all man. He's probably the second most complete wrestler on this list besides Daniel Bryan. His promo game is almost unmatched. His in-ring work is almost unmatched. It's insane. He's kind of faltered in the past when it comes to the Fiend storyline and also the disastrous Universal title run. But besides that, he's been great. Then Neville, as you already said, I mean, there's not much else to say. His in-ring work, his innovation has been incredibly important to the future of wrestling and just to like innovate in the air and just what you can do from the top rope. So I'd say those guys are probably my favorites. Honorable mention to Bray Wyatt and Finn Balor, but those guys are probably all my favorites. But let's go into favorite tag team of all time. So what's your favorite tag team?
This is tough. I mean, there's definitely a couple. I want to say my favorite tag team is probably I'm going to say the New Day is my favorite tag team, mainly because like they were at first they became stale pretty quickly, and WWE kind of just shoved them down our throats. And at that point, I hated the New Day, but they've been able to really overcome that and adapt from that. And again, we talked about it with the Usos versus the New Days. There's not really any bad New Day matches. Like every time they get in the ring, I'm expecting a good match from them. That's just the level of workers they are. Obviously, not every match they've had has been perfect. They've had some bad matches, but I mean, really, their in-ring work throughout their entire time as a stable has been incredible. And when they were thrown together, it just seemed like they threw three random wrestlers together out of nowhere. But I at first I didn't really see much of a bright future for the New Day, but they've managed to become a Hall of Fame tag team. They're first ballot Hall of Fame. They're easily first ballot, and that's a testament to how good they've been in the ring, some of their storylines, and WWE has also really developed all three of them as single stars. Kofi Kingston was just a mid-carder before that. He was a great mid-carder, but just a mid-carder, and then he had that world title run, and now he's one of the best tag team wrestlers we've ever seen. Big E, same thing. I mean, Big E was always destined to be a main carder down the line, but this really skyrocketed that and really gave him that charisma that he needed. And Xavier Woods, I think, is the underrated one out of the three. I think everyone knows that. And I mean, I think it's only time will tell when he will get that opportunity to get that main card run. It's really developed all of them. And there's not one match you can point to and say it's bad. And also, again, the Usos is another one. I would probably put the New Day a little bit above the Usos, but the Usos have been involved in so many great storylines since joining the WWE. And again, heel or face, they're going to work. They're better. They're way better as heels, I'd say, but heel or face, they're going to work. And then some past tag teams that I want to mention. Actually, no. I'm going to start with one current one, and that's RK Bro. They've only been together for about a year now, and they've already become one of my favorite tag teams of all time. They just have not gotten stale whatsoever. And we're waiting for that day. It's not going to be WrestleMania like we all expected, but we're waiting for that day where Randy Orton turns on him. But it's just, I mean, for the time they've been incredible together. It's just been such a pleasant surprise because I would have never expected this to work out for this long of a time. And then a tag team sort of similar to that is Team Hell No. And that really got me into tag team wrestling a lot because they're dynamic with their storylines. It really got me into tag team wrestling. And I think, again, that's another random combination of wrestlers, Daniel Bryan and Kane, but they worked out. And those anger management segments are still some of my favorite segments of all time in WWE. So they're up there as well. And, well, this isn't one of my favorite tag teams of all time yet, but I think they have the potential to be. And that's Alpha Academy. And that might sound weird to a lot of people, but I think they have the potential to be one of the better tag teams in history because that's another one where it's just too. I feel like most of these tag teams outside of really the Usos are just, at first they look like random combinations of superstars, and then out of nowhere they become great. And I feel like Alpha Academy, Chad Gable and Otis mesh so well together, and they both help each other out so much in the ring and on the mic. So I think that one could rise up my list as the years go on. Obviously, right now it's just a tag team that I enjoy, but I think they're going to as well. And then one more that I'm going to touch on. I'll touch on two. It's the Revival and Gargano and Ciampa. Those were the two prime NXT tag teams. So, and really, you talked about their feud before. It's been incredible. So I'm going to throw them in as well. They really defined NXT tag team wrestling for me. So I'm going to throw them in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I got a few. I do agree with that Gargano and Ciampa and the Revival right there. That's probably one of my favorite tag teams. Both of them are two of my favorite tag teams of all time. I think the Revival gets this slight nudge for me just because of longevity, but both tag teams are great. I'd say from a pure in-rings perspective, the Young Bucks, probably my favorite tag team of all time, but literally, like, that's only in-ring. I think there's a lot more that can be, like, there's a lot more complete tag teams out there that I'm a fan of. I want to say the Hardy Boys, one of my favorites of all time. I mean, you can't really, like, you can't think of tag team wrestling without the Hardys. I think they have insane longevity. I think the work that they've done together is historic. Probably, when they choose to retire, they'll probably be the most decorated all around tag team of all time. But then New Day, man, honestly, I think the New Day is my favorite tag team of all time too. I think they're just that damn good. I think there's really just you can't really when WWE hits a wall and they book themselves into a corner, 9 times out of 10 they'll throw something at the wall and hope it sticks. And this is probably the 1 in a million that stuck. Their original plan gimmick was kind of a new brand, Nation of Domination, and thank God they didn't go for that and they just let them embrace their personality. Because these three are intertwined with each other now. It's rare that you see a 3-man tag team lead to 2 world champions. And another one who could definitely get a main event role at any time and the fans would believe it. The only tag team in the past I've really seen do that is the Shield. I'm not really going to call Evolution a tag team because they're more of a stable, but I was on new I'd say the Shield was a very strong tag team overall, and just the work that they did was really good stuff. And then the Revival, And if we're just going with like other tag teams, Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly, Red Dragon, that was great. The Undisputed Era as a whole, that was great. But yeah, those would probably be my favorite tag teams of all time. All right, let's go into favorite theme of all time.
There's a ton. I get clowned for listening to WWE theme songs when I work out, but I really don't care. So I'll just scroll.
Yeah, so
I'll just run through the list of songs that I listen to, and that's first. My favorite one by far is Edge. That's
yeah,
Metalingus.
I have to go with that, and that's great.
Metalingus is my favorite one by far. I'm still really mad that they changed it, although Edge is changing his character. I'm really mad that they.
But also, I'm not sure if you noticed, they changed it to just another Alter Bridge song. So he actually just requested it.
Oh, he requested it.
Yeah, and it's the same band. Like he's friends with the band, so it's just the same band.
Okay, I didn't know that, but still, Metalingus is by far my favorite theme song of all time. I also really love Zack Ryder's theme song. Also, it's not something that I listen to. Like there are a couple WWE songs that I do listen to, but it's not one of them isn't Zack Ryder's. But every single time that comes on, every single time it would come on when he was in WWE, it was just the pop would be tremendous. Even though it wasn't some surprise that he was coming out there, it was just the pop would be tremendous from that song. One recent one that just really like got dropped was Roman Reigns' new theme song, and I think Roman Reigns' new theme song fits his character legitimately perfectly, and that's one of my favorites as well. So Roman Reigns' new theme song, and then I'm trying to think of some others because there's a ton. I really love Triple H's theme song. I really love Chris Jericho's WWE theme song as well. Randy Orton's is always a classic. What else is there? There's a couple. Oh, Christian's is one of them. Christian, his WWE theme song was one of my favorites. I also love Chris Jericho's AEW theme song as well. I think that one's up there as well. And then I'll end it off at both of CM Punk's theme songs, Cult of Personality and Fire Burns. Both of them are incredible. So those are the ones that I could just think about. Oh, and Batista's theme song. Batista's theme song is incredible as well. So those are all my favorite theme songs of all time.
Yeah, I'd say my favorite theme song of all time is This Fire Burns for CM Punk. I think just objectively, I haven't been able to really. I listen to WWE theme music too when I get to the gym sometimes, but like I haven't been able to like really find a song since This Fire Burns that like could fit also anywhere else. Because also it is made by Killswitch Engage, which is a very, very big band in the metal scene. So the fact that it's that good is not really that surprising considering who made it. But I think if you look at other stuff there too, I think Aleister Black's was probably one of the best ones they did in WWE. I think Root of All Evil was insanely good. I think Johnny Gargano's Rebel Heart, also Tommaso Ciampa's No One Will Survive, which sadly was changed, and I'm kind of pissed that they changed it, but Ciampa's is so damn good. One that doesn't get nearly enough respect is probably Dolph Ziggler's Here to Show the World. I think that theme is insanely good. And I think honestly Downstate is probably the most consistent external band when it comes to making theme songs. Because you have Dolph Ziggler, you have The Miz, which is a great one. But then you also have Cody Rhodes' Kingdom. And I think Kingdom is probably my pick for the best modern, like current wrestling theme out there. I think although a bunch of songs like, I would argue if Edge still had Metalingus, yeah, it would probably still be the best one. But like Cody Rhodes' Kingdom is so synonymous with this character that if he does, debut at WrestleMania, like it looks like he will, for them to have anything but Kingdom play would be a disservice. And since it is like a public domain song, since it's by Downstate and they could license it to whoever they want, hope that WWE, hope there's a clause in Cody's contract. So at this point, it'd be wrong to go to anything else. But I think that song. I think CM Punk Cult of Personality, also a great one. Undisputed Era, their song Undisputed. I really, really liked Shayna Baszler's old theme. Loyalty is Everything, CFOS's song. That song is brilliant. Same as The Rising Sun for Shinsuke Nakamura. I think that song is probably
Nakamura too. And also, now that I think of Nakamura, for some reason Bobby Roode gets brought up in my mind. I love Bobby Roode's Glorious theme song.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I'm not sure if you know the background about that song, but Bobby Roode's theme song was originally made for Nakamura.
It was.
Like, yeah,
I had
Nakamura's
no.
original gimmick was gonna be kinda like that, and I can't even imagine that because I think that's fucking crazy, but, originally, it was supposed to be for Nakamura. Nakamura was like, "This doesn't really fit my character," so they made the Rising Sun, and they gave it to Bobby Roode, and it worked for both guys. I mean, that gimmick for Bobby Roode was really good, and then, like, that theme song was his gimmick for a good long while, but, no, it's really interesting to look at that. I think, one right now that was just made that I don't think has gotten enough respect right now is Keith Lee's new AEW theme song. I think it's a really good song. I think it's a slapper, but also the Butcher and the Blade have probably the most song in wrestling right now. I've not really heard a song like it. It has like a few really nasty riffs in there, and it makes sense because the Butcher, Andy Williams, was the former lead guitarist for Every Time I Die, which is a big metalcore band. So, I'd say those are probably my favorite theme songs in wrestling. So I guess just one more question I have is what's your least favorite feud of all time?
Least favorite feud of all time.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, one of them is Seth Rollins versus The Fiend. That was atrocious. And another one, even though I said before I did somewhat enjoy Seth Rollins' reign, this is another feud in there that I hated, and that was Seth Rollins versus Baron Corbin.
Yeah.
I did not like that feud whatsoever, and I think that one dragged way too long. Also, that Bobby Lashley versus Rusev feud was just not a good one to me at all.
I think that one's my least favorite of all time, honestly. I think the Rusev's a cuck storyline is probably the worst one that they've done in a very long time.
And the funny part is too, again, that's when around when I was taking my break, and like I wasn't watching at the time, but when I got back, I was watching YouTube videos, and everyone was saying this is such a bad feud. So I made it a mission to watch the majority of the feud, and I couldn't finish it. It was just bad for me. I did not like that feud at all. Some other really bad feuds for me were I didn't like Dean Ambrose's last run against Seth Rollins. I don't think that was like an all-time bad feud, but I think like it just dropped significantly from the time when obviously I said before that was one of my favorite feuds, but you could also make an argument that at the end of Dean Ambrose's WWE stint, that was one of the worst feuds when Ambrose was heel. So that again, that's not like an all-time bad feud. I would say it's obviously not a good feud, but I would just say like from dropping it to one of the better feuds in recent memory to a bad feud in general, that's definitely very underwhelming for me. Another one, this is a more recent one, so it's like kind of fresh in my brain. It might not be one of my least favorite feuds ever, but Bobby Lashley versus Brock Lesnar was horrific.
Yeah.
The match was the cherry on top, and it was horrific. I didn't think this was a feud that needed much of a build-up, but with the match being that bad combined with their feud being that bad, it was just one that I can't watch again. And I'm trying to think of a couple more really bad feuds.
Yeah. I mean, I can chop in while you're still thinking. You and I share a lot of the similar ones there. I think a lot of those feuds I have in common with you. I think one of my least favorite feuds of all time, like probably is that Bobby Lashley Rusev feud. I think that feud is just absolutely atrocious. That nearly made me stop watching wrestling in general. Is that bad? But then a few other ones. I think Enzo, the weird Enzo and Nia Jax storyline thing that kind of went nowhere. That one was probably one of my least favorites. And also with another Enzo and Cass guy, Cass versus Daniel Bryan, which led to Cass getting released by the company. Like that was a really bad feud overall. Cass literally got fired because he kicked a midget, which is kind of hilarious in retrospect. But Cass doing that. I think there are also a few other feuds that just didn't work. Greater amount of really atrocious feuds in there. I think it was probably Becky. I don't remember. I think Charlotte Flair's just had a few really crappy ones. Charlotte Flair versus Carmella And then Carmella versus Asuka was absolutely abysmal. Now if we're going to like into other feuds, I think that because man, they're just like there have been more often than not some kind of crappy feuds over the years. I think AJ Styles Omos just sucked. Just boring. And I think also Jinder Mahal versus kind of anyone also kind of sucked. I would say, yeah, I'd say that's probably a good list of my least favorite feuds. And I guess the other one is it was even before my time, but like I went back and watched it and I was just like, damn, this sucks. John Cena versus the Nexus, probably the worst feud in a very long time, maybe in wrestling history. But and Roman Reigns versus Triple H before WrestleMania 32. That one was absolutely dog water.
I have two more also. Now that you brought up Roman Reigns, this one just came in my head. Not Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar in general, even though it's definitely stale. But the first Roman versus Lesnar feud,
Yeah.
the match was great. The match was great, but that feud was
because no one wanted him there. No one wanted him there.
Exactly.
The fans turned on it in an instant. So,
so that feud I didn't like at all, and I'm trying to remember what the feud was because it fell out of my head. It was Goldberg versus Roman Reigns.
Yep.
And it's because I actually think there was writing on the wall for this to be one of Reigns' better feuds because they could have had obviously the match wasn't going to be great and we knew who was going to win, but I think it had the writing on the wall to be one of Reigns' better feuds in his heel run because you could have Goldberg say something like, "Oh, I was Roman Reigns before Roman Reigns. I was the head of the table before the head of the table," something like that, and then you build a feud from that. But there was just no substance for that feud at all, and even in the first feud, there was no substance for that at all. So that Roman Reigns versus Goldberg feud had potential, in my opinion, to be one of Reigns' better feuds in his heel run, but it was probably his worst one. So that one's definitely up there as one of my least favorite feuds as well.
Yeah. I guess just another one. Least favorite match of all time.
Least favorite. It's definitely Seth Rollins versus The Fiend. And that's a popular pick, but it's definitely that one. I hated that match. And also, again, this is another one that I might be a little biased towards because I really want to see this match for a while. That's Brock Lesnar.
I know what you're going to say. Yeah.
I
mean, Brock versus Bobby, that was disappointing as hell. For me, I'd have to say the 2022 Men's Royal Rumble. I think that's probably my least favorite match because there is so much potential to do so much better shit than what they did. They had a stacked roster. They had a stacked NXT roster, and they shit the bed on it completely. So I would say that's probably my least favorite match of all time. But then other ones, Fiend versus Goldberg, that single-handedly destroyed the Fiend's allure. Seth Rollins versus the Fiend, also abysmal. But then also Kevin Owens versus Goldberg. Goldberg beating Kevin Owens didn't need to happen. It made absolutely no sense. I think, man, if I had to choose like a few more to be in here, as far as other matches go, Damian Priest, The Miz in their lumberjack match with the zombies. That was just kind of shitty all around. But yeah, I'd say those are probably my least favorite matches of all time. And then probably like pick your Charlotte Flair match. Just like your basic Charlotte Flair, there's no like there's good in-ring stuff, but there's absolutely no story. And boring after a while. Honestly, Charlotte Flair versus Nia Jax when Nia dumped her on her head. Probably that one. That was a pretty shitty watch. But yeah. And I guess just to completely end things, least favorite wrestler of all time.
There's a lot of guys that I don't really like at all. One of them is Big Cat, and this isn't really me thinking too much about outside perspective, like what they do outside of wrestling. Obviously, there's some really bad people in the world of wrestling.
Purely in ring and their character work. This has nothing to do with the real people.
Yeah, purely in ring. It's Big Cass. I did not like him because it seemed like for a while that they were trying to push him, and that was just really hard for me to watch. Because I don't know what it was. I just didn't see much of anything in him. I didn't see much of a tag team wrestler in him. He didn't seem like really a wrestler at all to me. So, I mean, they could have developed him, got him in better shape, and then he could have been solid, but I just didn't like him at all. This one, it's not really his fault, but I would put it more so on WWE for just throwing him right in there. And that was 2015 Roman Reigns because they just threw him right in there. And there was no substance to his character at all. And I do think that 2015 Roman Reigns wasn't a bad wrestler at all. I just think they threw him. I think they threw him in the fire way too early. So I think that was just a horrible run for Roman Reigns, and it was mainly WWE's fault. It wasn't Roman's fault at all. He still needed time to develop. Um, who else? I I never really liked Jinder Mahal too much. Even before his title run, again, I don't really see much with him at all, like in any storyline. Like, there's not really one good memory I have of Jinder Mahal in ring. Um, I'm trying to think of a few others right now. I think that could be it for now. But if I have someone else, then I'll interrupt you about it. But those are the three that come to mind for me first.
Yeah, for me, I think I have a few. I think if we are going, just based on irrelevancy, you fucking remember Oksana or whatever her name was?
I remember.
Just
Yeah.
irrelevant. I don't know. It's just she was always just like there. It was always the Total Divas and Oksana against a face team of Total Divas. And for me, I was just like, who the hell is this lady? Like, I have no interest in watching this random lady because at least the Total Divas had a storyline going on. She was just kind of there. So I think there's like nothing thrilling in ring on her end. Man, I had a few people that I was thinking of that I didn't really that I kind of forgot about, but I guess I'll go with like just a few people. I think original big cast. I think Way's managed to rebrand himself on the independent scene. I think he's done a lot better for himself there. So I'm happy for him. Karrion Kross, probably my least favorite male wrestler of all time. And it's not even his fault. It's not even his fault. It's just that he is so bland and his in-ring moves. Like if he was brought in a different way to WWE and he was treated a little bit differently by their booking, specifically in NXT, and they didn't make him be the final boss of NXT and instead like made him like gave him a bit more of a character than I have a cool theme song and I make kind of like cryptic promos, then I'd be fine with him. But like they literally made him and then into their next big bad. But it's just like they really kind of shit the bed with him, and Karrion Kross just never really was interesting to me. Plus, like his whole thing with QAnon on the outside and just kind of sours the taste in my mouth. It just makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable for kind of like watching him or supporting him in any endeavor. And I guess just like if we're really just talking about someone who I just don't really like vibe with, I guess Ryback.
Oh,
I
yeah,
have joked.
yeah.
I've joked on Twitter before. I think it'd be hilarious if any company got him for a one-off appearance. Reportedly, I think he's charging upward of 10,000 per appearance now. Like his mind is just that war. 10,000 appearance on the independents. But I would freaking shit myself if Tony Khan shelled out 20K for Ryback to make an appearance in the Casino Battle Royal. I think the fans would like laugh their ass off, not like be happy or anything, just laugh their ass off. But Ryback was just the biggest meathead, kind of waste of space on the roster. He was good originally, but then like by 2014, he just completely really showed that he was just not good at all.
I have one more guy that I remembered, and this has nothing to do with him outside of the ring either, because there's a lot of bad things that have come out about him outside of the ring. So if we're just talking about in ring as well, I still don't like him, and that's Alberto Del Rio.
Yep.
I think he's a guy that was just overpushed. I think they were trying to. I don't know what they were trying to do with him, honestly. I think he was just overpushed for no reason. As a mid-carder, sure, he might be okay as a heel, but I just didn't see the potential for him being what was it, like a 4-time world champion or something like that, whatever he was. And then again, that's another guy I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. I can't think of one memorable storyline. I mean, the only one is that CM Punk thing in 2011, or I think it was 2011. Yeah, 2011. And even I really don't remember what happened there. I just remember Alberto Del Rio cashed in, and then some other stuff happened. I don't know, but I never really liked what he brought to the table at all.
Honestly, I completely forgot about Alberto Del Rio, and now that I'm remembering him, like I think, yeah, I think he's probably my least favorite wrestler of all time because he just never. For some of those wrestlers that I mentioned, might have popped once or twice. I have never been interested in Alberto Del Rio. You could never sit me down saying we're watching Alberto Del Rio or Alberto El Patron match. Like he is the most bland, boring character I've ever seen. Seems like a shit human being outside of the ring. I understand the whole reason why he was pushed so hard was because they were trying to get that demographic because of the history of wrestling in Mexico, but he was so bland. He was so ridiculously bland. No, was not interested. Original Sin Cara suffers from this too. Original Sin Cara, who just would not work with anyone. He was probably one of my least favorites. But yeah, I'd say Alberto Del Rio is probably my least favorite wrestler of all time. But yeah, man, that's gonna do it for this episode of the Allheart Podcast. I really, I'm really grateful for you to coming on, Justin. I know we got another show tomorrow. But really, it was really interesting just to pick your brain here and just kind of learn more about your background and just like thinking more about like what you like in wrestling, what you don't like, and just your favorite stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on as well. And everyone subscribe to the Allheart Podcast. And you'll see us tomorrow on Off the Top Rope on the TW's and YouTube channel. So
yeah, you'll see us tomorrow. Off the Top Rope is going to be live 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. or no, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be on the Wrightway Sports Network YouTube channel. But for now, this is Matt Blaustein. This is episode 2 of the spring series of the Allheart Podcast. We'll be back next week. Have a nice night, everyone.